Howdy y'all, and welcome back to our episode on Gunbuster. Today I am joined by Chris Coplain from the wonderful Retro Hangover podcast. How are you doing this evening, Chris?
I am doing great. Thank you for having me on, and thank you for the kind words. I am happy to be here on the Anime Field Guide. I've been waiting for this. I really appreciate having me on.
Classic thing of I'm on your show, please come on my show. And just have a good time hanging out, really. I mean, that's what we're all doing at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'd be surprised. I think the show that you were on is like our number 6th or 7th most listened to show in the history of the podcast.
Which is wild to me. I never expected anyone to really show up for Harvest Moon. But I mean, the community's there. We show up when you talk about it. So
it's not one of the most popular Harvest Moons, in my opinion, either. Maybe it is. Maybe I just misread it. I would think like a Harvest Moon 64 or the original for the Super Nintendo would take it. I just like, oh, okay. Yeah, cool. Let's do this. I'm all about it. And maybe it's because you were there. I think that might be it.
I don't know. I'm certainly passionate about the game, but you just never know. I've had plenty of other episodes that I've done that I was passionate about, and it's one of those like, oh, nobody listened to this. Cool. Moving on. So you just never...
Exactly.
That's just the way the algorithm works sometimes. You never quite know. Well, of course, I'm very familiar with you and your podcast and the things that you get to do with your co-host. But for those listeners who are probably new to the podcast or haven't heard of you before, what is it that you get to do on the internet?
Well, we're a retro video game podcast, myself and my partner Shane. What we do is we take a video game 10 years or older, we play it, we talk about it, we discuss whether or not the game has held up today in terms of its story, presentation, gameplay, all the typical stuff. And, like I already just said, we talk about whether or not it holds up today. So, it's pretty standard retro gaming podcasting stuff, I guess. But I think that's what happens when you've been around for 11 years. I'm not saying we set the standard, but we are pretty we're pretty interesting. We just we have dick jokes too. I guess that's completely, original on the internet. I don't know. Go check it out. We have a good time. Yeah. I'm not selling it too well. I'm selling it horribly.
It's 10 years plus of podcasting. You're tenured at this point, so.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, you guys really do have fun on your show, and it does come through. It's just a cool time just hanging out. So I always enjoy whether it's the Flight or the 5x5 or, again, like your main shows. Even the IO Saturnalia, even though I have no previous experience. I didn't even know what a Sega Saturn was. Your podcast and many others that I've, both that I've been on and that I've listen to and subscribe to. It's always just a cool time to hang out and reminisce about a bunch of games that I've never played but sound really fun, and then about half of them I could probably look up on like Nintendo Switch Online and experience for the first time. So I think it's retro gaming podcasts are really cool, especially in a time when everyone's trying to sell you a subscription service or a live service game. Just sit down and play something comfy or cozy, or just a game that's going to just kick your ass for a couple of hours. But you just got no choice but to get good unless you have a replay function. But that's why the replay function is there, so you can learn.
One of the retro video game stores, now this was a while ago, this was back in 2016. So it's almost been 10 years since I was there. But one of the best retro gaming stores I've been to was in Gulfport, Mississippi. That's where I got my copy of East.
Like any kind of coastal towns, you'll find just a bunch of cool shops when you have basically ports and people going in and around. Anytime you're near an air base or a military base as well. And then one of my favorite stopovers is in Tupelo, Mississippi. And I think it's called Greatest Hits. So whenever I'm in the Tupelo area, I like to go into Greatest Hits. Now, they stock everything. It's one of those stores of books, games, posters, manga, CDs, vinyl. Like it's one of those everything stores. So ostensibly, I'm in there to go, what kind of anime stuff do you have? Some days it's some cool gems. Other days I'm walking out with Speed Racer. Other days, I'm pulling out the live-action Devilman from 2004, and that's about all I'm going to say about Devilman from 2004. So it's a treasure dive every single time. It's always a pleasant surprise, even if I don't buy anything from there.
I think a lot was what I see though when it comes to anime and video games is there is a lot of crossover there. Of course, that's probably just because Japanese culture is very much into anime, manga, and video games. I wouldn't say that the birthplace of video games is in Japan, but that's definitely the country that really made video games mainstream. And of course, they're going to bring their culture over into various forms of media. So yeah, plenty of overlap there. Plenty of things for everybody to enjoy.
Yeah, and speaking of just stone cold classics and crossovers, I mean, we're of course here to talk about Gunbuster from 1988, and it's a good old 6-episode OVA from the minds and mad lads of Hideaki Anno and folks at Gainax. So before we dive in too much, we of course have the listener spotlight. We've got a couple of comments from the field guide community about Gunbuster. Starting here with Otaku Nate, and he has a podcast called the Otaku Nate Show. He says he's actually one of the few folks who owned the Bandai Visual release of Gunbuster back in 2007. He watched it on a portable DVD player on a family road trip through Utah, and initially he didn't think of much of it except for, wow, cool robot, great visuals, and oh boy, boobies. Of course, we got the Discotheque Blu-ray a couple of years back in like 2023, so he rewatched the series with the new dub. Not only did he appreciate it even more, but its ending still gets the waterworks going. Always will watch the final minutes of Gunbuster when he needs a good cry. I completely understand why so many hail this as one of the definitive series of the 1980s, and I consider this a mandatory viewing for fans new and old. Sums it up right there. Giant robot, great visuals, and naked girls. What else could you want from an 80s OVA? Yeah, Fallen no Kiku wraps us up with, I only watched this in the last year or two, and I really enjoyed it. The lighthearted sports anime style beginning that slowly revealed itself to be more complex series feels like it shouldn't have worked, but somehow it did. And even though it was only 6 episodes, I don't feel like it wasted any time. It also kind of felt like a preview for a lot of the themes that would show up in Evangelion years later, especially near the end.
Oh, very much so.
Yeah, as far as our little icebreaker here, we also have a community spotlight that I threw out to the Discord. But the community spotlight was essentially, you get to remake your favorite movie or TV show, but now it must include a giant robot. So, Fallen no Kiku, she writes in, she would remake The Big Lebowski. The robot itself looks like Jeff Bridges' character and gets into travel places to do nothing. It has a dispenser for White Russians and can transform into a bowling ball. Somehow the movie actually didn't change much.
How's the robot impregnate the woman who's kidnapping him?
Surprisingly, she didn't get into that detail, so I don't know. I'll leave that up to the listener imagination with that detail. Do you have one, Chris?
I don't know if I want to go for funny or funny somewhat serious. That's a good question. I think if I'm going to do it, I think I'm just going to go. Let's make it funny. Seinfeld, a mecha show about nothing, where all they do is they run into other mecha all the time and it just goes nowhere. And then they sit down at the shop and they're all sitting down in mecha and eating food. It wouldn't change much either, honestly. It would kind of be like Super Robot Wars, except about nothing.
Mine, I kind of went for a funny because it's kind of weird pick. I'd say I want the Wizard of Oz, but with giant robots.
I love it. I love that idea.
Yeah. So the idea is basically Dorothy travels Oz and she's recruiting robot pilots. So it's the Tin Man, Scarecrow, and the Lion. They all have one piece of the giant robot. So you got to Voltron it together to take down the witch. And then, of course, in dramatic fashion, must take down the entire city of Emerald City, which is also, of course, a giant robot, in order to defeat the Wizard of Oz in a winner-takes-all battle for the fate of the land. And then the finishing move is to send him off in a balloon. You
know what it made me think of?
What did it make you think of?
And that's just randomly, is if you made Donnie Darko with mechs.
Huh.
If you made Donnie Darko a mecha anime, it might make sense then.
I haven't seen Donnie Darko. What's it about?
It's about a guy who doesn't really appreciate life, And then one night he goes through a wormhole and he has to like live through the past. And you find out at the end, like a plane kills him, like crashes into his house or something,
Oh, okay.
like a plane engine. Yeah. And like it's all about wormholes and dimension traveling and a rabbit. I don't know.
Oh, kind of like almost like a wormhole Alice in Wonderland kind of thing, or like a rabbit.
No, it's like I don't know. It's like it has some mixed messaging, which would make it like a perfect Anno anime.
So you're actually trying to fix Donnie Darko, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Okay.
Like, you just throw mechs in it and you put gainax behind it, and it makes sense.
Well, there you go. So thank you guys for playing. So let's get into our show notes proper. So Chris, I'm going to yap for a little while. I've got the summary, and then we'll do a studio brief on gainax, kind of where the studio was around this time. And then, of course, cap it off with Hideaki Anno, because, of course, this is the show. This is his directorial debut of, just this general stuff to kind of do the set dressing, and then we'll get into, the story conversation. So interesting that you should talk about Donnie Darko with all of, like, the wormholes and all the weird space travel stuff, because it just almost goes like perfectly into the main conceit of Gunbuster. This title is unique, and it's actually like a combination of like titles and storylines of a number of things, but primarily episode 1 is an homage to the classic tennis manga and anime Aim for the Ace. And then, of course, you've got Top Gun starring Tom Cruise. Chiefly the coach never takes off those aviators. The Top Gun stuff doesn't really apply until about episode 2 beyond, like 2 or 3. But your general summary for Gunbuster is Noriko Takaya is a freshman mecha pilot trainee at the Okinawa Flight School who is selected for advanced placement alongside the talented senior Kazumi Amano, basically the school idol, and she's assigned to be a partner by the newly arrived coach. The coach's name is Koichiro Ota, and everyone just calls him Kochi. He is one of the survivors from a failed space expedition led by Noriko's father, Admiral Yuzo, who perished against an interstellar alien force that basically wants to destroy our solar system. So naturally, the students suspect favoritism and subject Noriko to all kinds of bullying and harassment, but Coach never gives up on her and personally trains Noriko to match the level of Kazumi through hard work and guts, because he believes Noriko to be the key to humanity's survival. Again, I said this is like a reference to Aim for the Ace, which is a 1970s girls tennis classic. The manga is by Sumika Yamamoto. It ran from like 1973 to about 1980, but chiefly it's the Osamu Dezaki directed anime series. And the summary for Aim for the Ace is the clumsy freshman tennis player is partnered with the genius senior classman by the new tennis coach to enter and take on all the tournaments. And so she endures low self-esteem, anxiety, and all kinds of bullying, but pushes through with hard work and guts. And, thanks to Coach's training, she rises to the occasion. So there's your comparison, because episode 2 and onwards, it's Noriko and Kazumi are sent to space where they have further training on machine weapons, and they strive to become the best of the best in order to pilot the experimental giant robot, the Gunbuster, where Noriko and Kazumi's battles take place further and further into deep space while time accelerates back on Earth. So this is where we also start including references to like the science fiction novel The Forever War by Joe Haldeman. So it's a drama of, falling out of touch and subsequently outliving all of your friends and family. You can also toss in Starship Troopers by Robert Heinlein, another book about a long, brutal interstellar war with aliens. Even episode titles like episode 5's Time Enough for Love. That's literally a novel by Robert Heinlein. And so producing this anime is, of course, the legendary and, somewhat infamous Studio Gainax, the studio founded by animation nerds who went pro. So, of course, Gainax is formed from a local Tottori dialect from one of the co-founders, Toshihiro Akai's hometown. Basically, Gainax is Gaina means giant, and then they put a giant robot X at the end. So you got Gainax. And you can get the full story with the Studio Rundown episode 7 that I did on Gainax. But as far as we are talking about for the story of Gunbuster, where the studio is at this point, they're kind of in dire straits because Gainax originally came together to produce one film. It was a science fiction epic, the Royal Space Force, The Wings of Oniamis. It was created and directed by Hiroyuki Yamaga, with Hideaki Anno on mechanical designs, Yoshiyuki Sadamoto on character designs. And unfortunately, while they had positive press, it was a combination of factors, but the project went over budget and flopped at the theaters. Their next project, R20, which was like a Route 20 with bicycles, a la some Akira comparisons there, that also went belly up in production. So after 2 failed projects, Gainax is practically broke and deeply in debt. So now they have to make something profitable in order to not default on their loans and declare bankruptcy. So they make some adult games. That's how they start. So it's quiz shows, card games, correct answers remove articles of clothing, and they made a number of these through the mid-80s, and at the tail end of those, the cast of Gunbuster was not spared this treatment. They also made some non-erotic games as well. Most notably, Gainax produced and published the Princess Maker series. You had the goal was to raise a young girl into a princess who can lead her kingdom, had over a dozen endings depending on the choices you made through the game, and these guys desperately needed a hit. So, of course, the idea that the concept for Gunbuster was pitched. And so the director, of course, is Hideaki Anno. Gunbuster is his directorial debut. And, this established his career as a director, as an auteur director, with a bit of a reputation that was established in this work, specifically like episode 6, the design styles there. His professional career begins with key animation on Superdimensional Fortress Macross and its movies from 1982 through 84, Megazone 2-3 Part 1, as well as various uncredited animation for Urusei Yatsura, Angel's Egg, and Project Echo. And one of his more notable credits was key animation on Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, which is the giant warrior scene where you had the melting clay golem rising from the hill and fires the laser beam that obliterates the horizon. And so, of course, after Gunbuster, you've got Nadia in 1990, Neon Genesis Evangelion in 1995 with its 2 movies, and after much drama at Gainax, including trying to right the ship in the 2000s, he finally left. He formed Studio Kara, where he's done the rebuild of Evangelion series as well movies, as well as the various live-action films, Shin Godzilla, Shin Kamen Riders, Ultraman, all of that. And as of Gainax's closure in 2024 and beyond, he essentially acquired their back catalog and has since returned the rights of various shows back to their creators. So most notably, it was last year's new Pantheon stocking with Studio Trigger and Hiroyuki Imaishi. We also have news of more Gurren Lagann things on the horizon. So Chris, I've kept you waiting long enough. Did you know about Gunbuster as a full series before this, or were you mainly coming into this with the Evangelion background?
I'll be very honest here. The only thing I knew about Gunbuster was the very nude scenes that I saw on social media, and then people replying and saying that it was a good series. I did not know anything about Anno's involvement. I didn't know it was Gainax. I didn't know anything about that. Just, horny posting, essentially, is what I knew about Gunbuster coming into it. So when you proposed that we talk about Gunbuster, I was like, well, I actually want to see if there's more here, not knowing anything about its background. Because I did see in a lot of the comments and people talking about it that it was actually a good anime worth looking into. So when I got to episode 1, it was kind of underwhelming because I don't have that appreciation that it was trying to pay homage to. I don't know anything about Aim for the Ace. Of course, there's that Top Gun reference, but that's somewhat cliche even in Western media with a lot of things. So that didn't exactly strike me so much. But it just felt like a rather standard anime on first impression. Not that it was bad, because I know a lot of animes, the first episode can not really define where the series is going, and that's certainly the case for Gunbuster. But it just hit me as, okay, it's not isekai, so I wasn't expecting it to be. Not saying isekais are bad, but it's not that. So the whole entire high school setting is interesting. I really want to see where this goes, because I don't think that there's all to this, and I really hope there isn't. And as the series progressed, I was satisfied that it wasn't there. but it really gives a false impression about what I think the series is trying to accomplish overall. So in one way, yes, it did start as underwhelming, but upon full review, the first episode, I think, does a fantastic job of luring an audience in to later subvert their expectations.
I agree. Like, my first time watching this was after Crunchyroll posted it. So about October of 2023 was my first time like formally sitting down and watching it, because I'd also seen the first episode, I think previously. I hadn't really given it that much attention. So back then, and even sitting down again with the Discotheque Blu-rays now, being able to see it in slightly better quality, and of course now with the English dub this time. The first time I just watched it all in Japanese, and I kind of flip-flopped on this time. It's interesting to sit down and rewatch it, because there's almost this sense of dread that I feel knowing where it's going to go that I can't quite match to like the first time when I was going like, okay, where is this going? Like, I have no clue what is going on. In fact, like episode 2, even when like they were starting and going to the academy, I was going like, I know they didn't mention Ender's Game with this series, but I was sitting there going like, I'm getting a little bit of Ender's Game vibe with these. Like, I thought it was going to be more like like episode 2 with the dog fighting, and I kept waiting to see like, when are the aliens going to show up? I think with the reveal in episode 2, especially with that cryogenically frozen alien, the first time we see it was like the first time I was like, oh, okay, we're about to go some places. Because you have, it's not just like the fact that it's a robot pilot school. Like you start the deal and it's people are doing push-ups in the robot. You know, people are, doing jump ropes with the robot, which I'm thinking like, isn't this kind of like against the point? Like it was just a weird juxtaposition. People are doing like the whole cheerleader stack with robots. And it felt very like Project A-ish, where it was like this science school and everyone's just doing these athletic activities in a robot.
Yeah, it gave me the feeling that I was going to be in for a comedy anime series.
It really did, yeah. I think it's something I appreciate more on the rewatch, because now I'm not, in that level of what am I watching? I know I've seen it now, so I know what to, not just what to expect going forward, but it's familiar, so I can kind of get more of the in jokes, even though I have also not seen Aim for the Ace. I only know it through other folks and, talking about it, just general internet osmosis, as it were.
Now you said an homage. I don't know like the specific details about a lot of anime, and I've forgotten a lot over the time, just because I'm not into, a lot of the details about anime as much as I used to be. But do you think like this opening episode is kind of like a deconstruction of the standard anime? Just kind of you say homage, but you think in a way it's mocking it.
In some parts, yes, it is like homage, but also the other word is parody.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's a parody in both a respectful and, of course, a very humorous way, with, of course, because everything is in a giant robot. So it's just the juxtaposition of the ridiculousness of that. So it's the direct homage is more of, you got the new kid who's only been, doing this thing for a couple of months versus the school idol who's been doing it for years, and you pair them together. No one understands why. Everybody counts out Noriko. It's the same with Aim for the Ace. Everyone counts her out because she's a bit clumsy on the court. And so it's more of the character dynamic, and then the coach is really what the true homage is. And then all of the other robot stuff is where the parody lies.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. It's a better, and I agree with you here too. It's a better opening episode upon reflection than initial impressions. I wouldn't say it misleads you, but it does give you a false impression about where the series is about to head. And yeah, going back to it and rewatching it, which I haven't done for the record, but I think going back and rewatching it would give me a far different impression, as a good show should.
But yeah, like, because on character designs, you have Toshiyuki Kobuoka, who's also the chief animation director. So he's about 5 years into his animation career. So this is basically his character designer formal, like, full series debut. And after this, he went to work on like Giant Robo, The Day the Earth Stood Still. But also, one of the notable credits as a character designer and an animation director is when I shared with you, he's a character designer on the Lunar video games. as well as designs for Idolmaster, but I know you're a fan of Lunar.
Yes, big fan of Lunar.
Do you see the connections a little bit more between, or were there some familiar designs? Or
I'd really have to go back because I know that the designs for Lunar changed a little bit between the remaster and the original and the remaster, and then they changed again for the remaster and now the second remaster in terms of the cover art, because they didn't really change the names. But one of the things when you told me that, I'm like, oh wait. Yeah, like Gunbuster shares a lot of similarities with Galleon once he becomes the Magic Emperor. But other than that, it seems like they've done a pretty good job of keeping the characters' designs unique. None of them really seem to cross over too well. I almost do see a little bit more Macross than I do Lunar. But there are definitely some Lunar traits there. I think Lunar's more leans into the more stereotypical big-eyed anime, even though you do get that here, you get less of it. Whereas Lunar really leans more into that.
Yeah, but what I didn't mention was the Macross influence comes from another guy, Haruhiko Mikimoto, who's really done he's credited as the original character drafts. So it's more like Kuboka had the original character drafts by Mikimoto-san and then tweaked them. So that's a little bit where you see more of the Macross influence come in. If you want to see more of Mikimoto's work, he's also done original character designs for recent shows like Mobile Suit Gundam Hathaway, those films, and then Cabaneri of the Iron Fortress. But Kuboka is done, after the Lunar games, he's also done Shangri-La Frontier. He was the director on Shangri-La Frontier, so that was our episode 2. And both of these guys are no strangers to drawing cute anime girls. I think someone gets naked every single episode in this anime.
I would say every single one, but episode 2 is particularly egregious.
Episode 2 is a full-on bath sequence. I had that on the TV and I had to change the channel real quick. So my wife was in the other room and I was like, I am in danger. Had to watch that one on the phone. I was like, whoa boy. So after that, I watched it on the phone just in case he pulled another one on it. But I think episode 2 is the main deal. That was full frontal. I was like, whoa.
Yeah. The rest of the series, there's lewd, but I think there's only episode 5 was the only other time I could remember straight up, nudity or partial nudity. When you had when she lays down on her bed and you have the weird boob physics and the nipples are going all over the place.
Classic gainaxing all over the place, as the term used to be.
But you have a lot of panty and bra shots, and of course their outfits, they're leotards that really hug the crotch area. But yeah, episode 2 is the one where it really gets into the we're gonna have these girls just be naked. And apparently I read that it was censored because in the original run it showed pubic hair, which is a big no-no in Japan. And so they had to cut some of that out for later releases, which, did not know that. Not something I necessarily too much care about, but yeah, I mean, it's all there in episode 2 and it's very prolonged. So initially you reached out to me in our chat prior to, a week or so ago prior to recording this. And you were telling me that exact story about how you had to turn it off. And I'm like, yeah, it can't be that bad. And as soon as I watched it, I'm like, oh, I get it. I totally get why you would have to hide that one. That goes on for a while, and it's unashamed fan service. I was like, I cannot believe this is happening in an anime with reverence. This is crazy.
Because again, you go through the history of Gainax, they've always been pretty free with their fan service. So it's always an element that you have to think about going into the show. But I mean, it's one of those, that's just kind of what it was. And they were sitting there going okay, what sells? They're trying to market this thing to otaku. It's okay, what sells? Giant robots and naked girls. Let's go. So
yep.
Other than that, I mean, I can see some early, if we're talking the Evangelion connection, I can see some early character designs. Shinji Ikari is basically Noriko and a little bit of Nadia thrown in there from his next series. It's a combination of the two. In some ways, you can probably see our third pilot who's introduced in episode 2, the unfortunately named Young Freud. I wonder who that could be referencing, but your hot-blooded, red-headed Russian girl. And the English dub actually gets played up the accent just a little bit, which I found interesting. Yeah, I can see a little bit of like the earliest designs, like the attitude of Asuka Langley. There's a lot of just proto gainax stuff happening. This is, I almost view this as, this is where gainax really starts. Like there's the wings of Oniyami's. It's their first feature, and that's like obviously the start. But I kind of see Gunbuster in a way of one of Gainax's big things was always to be like self-referential in their later releases. So the more I see Gunbuster and the more that I experience Gainax's catalog, especially under Anno, and then seeing like other references and homages, especially in Gurren Lagann. It's like Gurren Lagann is basically Gunbuster with Getter Robo. More Getter Robo, but there's a lot of like Simon is literally Noriko. He has the whole, there's a scene like almost shot for shot where Simon's on the giant robot, his arms crossed, and he makes the big declaration, literally like Noriko, when she's rising out of the Gunbuster in episode 4. I mean, it's almost like a shot for shot. It's also in space. So, I mean, it is like, if that's not a direct reference, I don't know what is. So I just see so much of what Gainax would later become in this anime. And I think that's a really cool angle, I think, for the character designs.
I can see that because Noriko is someone who actually wants to get into
very much so, yeah.
Their suit. She wants to perform. She wants to do well. It's just that she is incapable. So everyone's trying to prevent her from getting into the robot. Like they don't want her anywhere near it. Whereas Shinji is the opposite. Like, you need to get in there. We don't care. Like, this is your job. Just do your job, get in the robot and do whatever you need to do. You're our only hope. So in a way, they're a direct contrast with each other in many respects. But in such, you can kind of see that narrative at play, and why you would believe they have so much in common is because they're almost polar opposites. And because they're such polar opposites, there is resemblance there. As odd as that is. That's when you said that, like, yeah, that makes sense. And then I think more about it, it's like they're not the same, but kind of the way that they behave in respect to the challenges they have, they react the same way. Because Noriko feels very helpless in her incompetence, the same way that Shinji feels helpless, at least like in the first couple of episodes for Eva, because we all know Eva goes crazy. But Shinji feels in terms of the pressure to perform. So that's there is that similarity there. And the thing that made it click for me without having any of this information, and you saw as soon as I went off in my Discord chat, and I was like, wait, is some of the animation stylings, specifically when I think in episode 4, and I noticed it with the hands, the motions of the hands, the way they kind of twitch and seize. And I'm like, that's an Eva. That is an Eva. And by the end of Eternity, the last episode, subtle nod, Eva did too, as well, to Gunbuster, if you really look at it. It's mask off. Like there's no denying there is Evangelion DNA all throughout that episode. It is like undeniable at that point, where it's like, okay, like this is definitely from the same mind of that other series. The designs are similar. Some of the theming gets really similar. Some of the ways that the Gunbuster starts to behave at the end of the show is just like, okay, yeah, yep. This is somehow connected to the people that made Evangelion. There's no way around it.
And I also like the struggle that that Noriko and Shinji share. This overwhelming enemy. In the case of Noriko, it's just sheer numbers. Because I mean, like, episode 2 is our first look at this mysterious interstellar alien force. I love how this thing is teased out too. If there's one more connection to make, I mentioned this earlier that Hideaki Anno worked on Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. These aliens look very similar to some of the creatures, and like almost, they're not fungal, but it's like just these weird, almost like Lovecraftian, just tendrils, spirals things, and there are these creatures called the Ohm, which are basically these giant pill bugs that can extend these tendrils all throughout Nausicaa. And so I can clearly see like that nature influence if you just gave it extra nightmare fuel. But I love how teased out the aliens really were, because even in episode 3, during her first sortie, you don't really see them. Like, they're moving so fast that it's not until episode 4 that they really just pull back that curtain and you get to witness the horror that these things are. And I think the similarities of, like, you know, going into that battle and the psychic damage and the PTSD that she experiences with, you know, losing a comrade as well. Just so many things that I've just kind of caught and went, oh yeah, he definitely was pulling from that later.
I'm going to be brutally honest here. I did not like episode 3.
How so?
So I think like the length of the episode hurts it. There's not enough time for the relationship between Noriko and Smith to really develop.
I agree there.
So
yeah.
it feels like by the end of the episode, her trauma is unearned. And the fact that, like, when you find, she's like, Smith, where are you? And I know maybe it's just because in most anime you always see it, and in just most film and media you see it, but I don't ever recall seeing Smith fight the enemies or dying on screen or anything like that.
You do not. It's completely from her perspective. I thought like the moment was effective. What I don't like is, I think it's perfectly fine for her to want to team up with Smith. And, you know, she's lost a comrade in the field and the guilt is there. I think the guilt is earned from the perspective of, hey, I partnered up with this guy. We were going to team up and now he's dead in our first battle. Along with, I think it said like 80% of the Top Gun guys, of the top machine guys were wiped out because the machines just couldn't keep up. And Noriko just survived based on a miracle. What I don't feel is earned is her entire romance arc with him. I think that's what I feel is overplayed. Because any time, like in the later episodes, she's like, it's okay, Smith, we're going to go fight now. It's like, what did that guy really do with you? Seriously, you guys shared like one night and wasn't even doing anything. You guys met in the pilots, or you met in the garage one time. They didn't really have a relationship. It was just kind of there. She suddenly has a crush. And now he's gone.
If they went more towards, I teamed up with this person who didn't have a partner, and they died trying to do something and advising me and had battle experience, and like they were more experienced than me and they died, and I just sat here and couldn't do anything. I think that would have been a better placed narrative, because you're right, the guilt does exist. And the guilt has to be there, like for her to overcome her barriers and her obstacles through her narrative arc. But the constant recalling through the remainder of the series, mind you, it does feel overplayed and unearned, and it gets annoying at times. I'm just like, please stop. Like there's nothing there. You just thought he was cute. But I can understand the perspective of I failed this person. That I understand.
Yeah, because I mean, the real tragedy is really after that, because the entire narrative conceit really in this last, after episode 2 and beyond, like they start to allude to it, but especially when you get to episode 3 and beyond, the real narrative gut punch, and what makes, I think, the real depression angle is, of course, how light speed travel works. Because essentially, when they're going so far out, they're essentially warping. And while they are in hyperspace, time is passing much quickly on Earth. So they said something like, one of the first example, I think, was when Noriko and Kazumi discover her dad's ship. The ship is destroyed, but it still managed to jump into hyperspace. And so it's essentially passing through the solar system on its way out. On the ship, it's been like a couple of hours have passed since the end of the battle for the ship. But for everybody else, it's been over 15 years since that defeat. Until something like, they said you're going to be out on a mission, and when they come back, it's only been a couple of hours it's only been like an hour, but 6 months have gone by for the folks waiting for them on the ship. And that time just keeps increasing as the show goes on. Yeah, and then there's the whole thing with Coach, where it's obvious that, you know, a lot of the girls at the academy and folks like have a crush on Coach. Everybody's crushing on Coach. And he's always on that walking stick and a cane. So as it turns out, he's got the space sickness. He's got the space radiation sickness, and he doesn't have much time left. This whole training mecha pilots to do the Gunbuster is basically the only thing keeping him alive. And so when you finally have that breaking point with Kazumi on that mission, it's like, well, if I go on this mission, Coach is going to be dead by the time I come back. I never confessed to him. And she almost gets everybody killed because of it.
One of like episode 2, one of the best things that we got with episode 2 is that's where it takes its mask off. Because I think in a lot of other animes, more lighthearted animes, like the first episode was, right? When they got to her father's ship, they would have found her father. And it would have been this cute little reunion, and everyone would have been happy. And, you know, there would have been some sort of revelation as to what happened. But everything's just blown up. Like, you can tell there's no hope for any sort of semblance that she had. Because in the first episode, she was like, my dad's alive out there. I have a feeling that my dad's alive. And right there, it shows you, nope, he's gone. And then this concept that they introduced, because right before they leave, they say, hey, let's have a birthday party. We'll have a birthday at the same time between her and Noriko and young Freud. And she says, yeah, we'll be back in time for it. We just got to complete the mission on time. And they are 12 seconds over, which caused it to miss the birthday party and caused this massive construction of the ship to get to completion by the time they came back. And it plants that seed there when they came back. She's like, oh, I'm so sorry about your dad. We all remember him. And I'm sorry that you had to find that out. And she freaks out. And then Amano turns to Jung and says, you know, for you it's been 6 months, but for her it's been less than an hour. And like completely putting in the entire concept of time. And that's where the show starts saying this is going to be a core concept of how we're going to do this moving forward. Time is going to be an important key in the passage of time and what it means to these characters. You might not know it at that moment, but that is what happens for the remainder of the series.
I think to kind of put that into perspective, I actually want to talk about the Gunbuster itself, you know, the giant robot that made all of this possible. You got Koichi Ohara, who's specifically credited as the designer for the Gunbuster robot. And he's known as the creator for MD Geist, which also the mech designs. And so he's the director of the Genocyber OVAs as well. So MD Geist and MD Geist Part 2, more of his contemporary mech design credits around this time. It was for Project Echo 3, Cinderella Rhapsody, and the Valkyrie flyers in Macross 2, Lovers Again. So that's him. As well as mech designs on the vehicles and such in Angel Cop, including the powered suits. And also no stranger to directing girls' action shows with little to no clothing. So Ikitosen Battle Maidens, Makin Ki, Burst Angel. He runs the gamut, shall we say. But yeah, the Gunbuster robot, it's actually, what I forgot was it was actually comprised of 2 spacecraft. So you've got the 2, because I knew about the twin pilot system, but I thought when I first saw the robot, I actually thought the Gunbuster was all like one robot in and of itself. It's actually 2 what are called like buster machines, which is a weird name for a spacecraft, but moving on. Yeah, these 2 high maneuver ships, 2 black ships, the buster machines. Noriko is piloting one, Kazumi's piloting the other. It's the epitome of a giant super robot. You got the purple eye laser beam cannon. You got the millions of lasers, multitude yellow lasers that can arc from its body and track all the targets. The finger missiles is like, where are all these finger missiles being stored? Episode 4, it's more of like an experimental stage, but episode 5 and 6, the thing's practically indestructible.
Yes. I also think a lot of the 2-part Gunbuster, I think that feels almost like a retcon in how they design it. And I think it almost felt like it was designed as such so they could get Amano and Noriko to work together. But I don't know if it would be. I think that's just me having that feeling, because they do a lot of this development with everyone has to have a partner. So when you apply that to the concept of there's two parts to the Gunbuster, okay, that makes sense. And then the final episode, there's a part 3 to the Gunbuster. That's not really part of the Gunbuster. It's just that
you got to have your giant robot Gatai sequence. You got to have the transformations. If you like your transforming robots, I mean, you really can't do much better than Gunbuster. On the disc, it's like almost like a black and yellow styled robot, but I think in the OVAs, it's almost like a black and goldish orangish kind of hue.
I like angular designs on my mecha. I like big shouldered mecha. And this is something that has a lot of that. It's kind of a stark departure from your Gundams and your Valkyries.
Yeah, you've got the Valkyrie flyers in the actual Buster machines, but yeah, this is like very much in the style of your classic super robots, basically from the golden era of like the 70s and early 80s, leading up to and including Gundam. But yeah, the Gunbuster is more in your style of your Mazinger Z, your Getter Robo, Zambot 3, Riding the Brave. Those big, bulky, it's not a riveted robot like you would see with the Tetsujin 28 and others. This is more, again, like your giant shoulder pads, big, bulky arms, bigger than, just about as big as the spaceship that's housing it. Because the Gunbuster robot itself is like bigger than some of the ships in the fleet. And it's just standing there with that iconic arms crossed, like, I don't give a rip.
Kind of similar to the SDF Fortress in Macross. The SDF Macross.
SDF Fortress. Yeah, just a big old bulky son of a bitch.
Yep. A lot of similarities there. And one of the other things that sets it apart, of course, is its similarity to the Evas in Evangelion. Is that it doesn't move like a robot. Again, setting itself apart from the Gundams, which was the overwhelmingly popular kind of feel there. It has very human movements. Like the way it behaves isn't so much like a mecha per se being piloted by a pilot, but it's a free-flowing, almost humanoid figure.
I especially like the little, I think a really iconic scene is when they launch all of the yellow laser missiles. They're like, hey, we got like 30,000 guys coming at us. Yellow lasers, they're all gone. That's kind of the scale. That's kind of the scale of ridiculous that we get up to. It's like, oh yeah, we have the first wave of aliens coming at us. About 6 billion of them. What? Yeah, we're just gonna fight them off now.
Yeah, with one robot.
With one robot, we're gonna fight off. We're gonna fight off roughly 6 billion things with one robot, and it still has enough energy through all of this to float down through a compressed Jupiter and survive the landing. One of those of, yeah, just turn your brain off for that concept. There's just too much. The scale is too big to comprehend, which kind of goes into the whole like scale of the ridiculous, or just the overwhelming odds that they have to face. It wasn't just Ohata who was working on the mechanical designs. We actually had Kazutaka Miyatake, who did more of all the other ones, the spaceships, the machines. And he's got a career designing for several high-profile series, and I just have it listed as just Macross, like a lot of things Macross. A lot of designs for the Dirty Pair, concept designs for Eureka 7 and its franchise. But speaking of Gundam, he's the mechanical designer for Mobile Suit Gundam Seed and Mobile Suit Gundam Seed Destiny. Now, I'm not going to say I see a lot of DNA for, like, say, the Freedom and Justice Gundams in the Gunbuster, but those are in terms of robots in those series, the Freedom and Justice and others later are kind of like on the bigger robots. And, Gundam always has like the one giant Gundam fortress. So it's there, obviously, like there's a lot of mechanical designs. It's in the 80s. This is basically the start of the peak of UC Gundam. These guys, Macross and everything, there's a lot of overlap. In fact, the machine weapons of this show come just shy. They are called the RX-7, which I'm like, get a little close to the RX-78. Yeah, the machine weapons, the basic machine weapons that the girls are training in for Okinawa and then their first batch, they're called the RX-7s. So those are the ones that they deploy for the combat against the aliens, but the ones that just can't keep up. And so it's when you get to episodes, I think like 5 and 6 are when they introduce the Sizzlers, where they've been able to mass produce and miniaturize Gunbuster robots. That if there's anything that's kind of like a miss, I wish we could have seen more of the Sizzlers in action. Because it's like when you get through, speaking of Gundam, like the RX-78 is basically a prototype. The mass-produced robots that would come after the Gundam for the Federation. Anyways, these are basically those. And they don't really get a lot of screen time. Like you see them in the loading bay, and then that's about it. It's like you just see them flying around, but you don't get to see one like particularly in action.
I like how they're called the RX-7s too, because that's also a car.
Yeah. So there's
I love.
Yeah.
I love that car.
There's a couple of touches like that. There's also, all the different spacecrafts. I think between, we don't really see the Luxion before it gets blown up. That's the one that Noriko's dad's on. Because it's really the Excellion, which is like the first big, it's basically the Luxion 2.0, which, of course, the giant angular of that ship is, I can't help but just see Star Wars when I see that particular, you show me a triangle ship, I see Star Wars.
Yeah, there's no doubt there. That's just, that's lifted. Yeah.
Absolutely rocked at the end of like episode 4. I was not sure, like even going into this, I wasn't aware that, or like when I first watched it, I wasn't aware that it was supposed to be like 4 episodes, like 4 episodes could have been the end. And then you go to the post-credit sequence and they go, oh, we got permission to do 2 more episodes.
Is that a joke or is that true?
No, I think that's what was true. I was looking around and it was like you had the 4, and then what happened is, so if we're going to go a little bit into the script and screenplay, in a large part, this was basically a collaboration. Yamaga, Okada, and of course Hideaki Anno. Okada and Anno basically took the script by Yamaga, worked it for the first 4 episodes, and then after episode 4, Hideaki Anno added a bunch of details and rewrites. So I thought it was a joke at first when I was watching the series, but going back, it's like, okay, it seems like episode 4 was successful enough that they're like, okay, we have enough to do 2 more episodes now. Because really 5 and 6 feels much more like, if you're talking about going crazy and Hideaki Anno just doing Hideaki Anno stuff, especially episode 6, that feels more like, okay, yeah, this is definitely something that he would have, it just feels so much like him. Again, just starting off on that auteur streak.
The tone for 5 and 6 is markedly different. It's a stark difference. Yeah, but then episode 6, as much as 5 is a departure from 4, and if the series had ended after episode 4, I think Gunbuster would have been a forgotten anime.
I think it probably would have been like a solid show, but it certainly would not have the reputation that it does today.
No. But like, I think, no, it wouldn't have anywhere near the reputation. Because I really think that episode 6 drives it home, but episode 5 ties up a lot of loose ends that existed throughout the series that needed to be tied up. That it did create. But yeah, I mean, episode 4 just ends on a very stereotypical kind of happy ending anime. Yeah, we did it. She almost she got in the way and almost sacrificed herself to save the day. Everything is better. We have the solution, we have the answer, and we're gonna finish it. But it doesn't feel complete. But if that's where it had ended, yeah, sure. Very standard anime finish. Let's wait till the second series, hope it gets picked up. Yeah, but without episode 5 and 6, this is not a complete series. But it also kind of defines, in my opinion, after watching it, defines what I think makes Gunbuster so great.
Yeah, it's that perfect blend, I think, of hope and tragedy. Even at the end, the ultimate sacrifice where they have to. So basically, it gets to the point where we know where the aliens are. We got to go get them. The idea is to set off this massive bomb, and I mean massive. It's going to take out a good chunk of the Milky Way galaxy if we set this thing off. Mm-hmm. Gunbuster rips out its own heart and then kickstarts the bomb. The Gunbuster is not only like outruns this black hole that literally sucks up the core of the Milky Way galaxy, it gets them home safely to Earth.
Even though it looks like a scrap of iron.
I feel like he wanted to end it with them just drifting in space and just like, hey, at least we're together. but then they said, no, you got to do something else. And so like, okay, fine, they made it to Earth. But honestly, I still see it as they may as well have died out there, because 12,000 years in the future. I don't know. I still see it as like he ends it on what's a cheery tone, but it's really just the ultimate knife twist at that point. Because my other thing is, I would think Anno, if he had more time, I think Anno would have done the classic thing of, well, now that there were no more enemies to kill, there was no unifying factor with these space aliens, humans just got back to killing each other across 12,000 years. It's like pockets. I was expecting to see like Earth with a bunch of craters from like nuclear blasts and stuff, and like we've bombed ourselves back into the Stone Age or something.
I mean, I don't know how much. I mean, if that was the last opportunity they had to make an episode, I understand kind of they went in that direction. I think them floating out in space and having nothing would have been more poetic. However, I do think if they had an opportunity to continue the series a little bit, they get back to Earth, and it's not abandoned, and they get back there, but
like they never existed. But I think the whole decision to do the last episode in black and white, yes, you can sit here and go, it was a budget decision and they were up against the wall. It was also animated on an open mat, and so you can see with this is more like on the DVDs where you can go view it in the original widescreen format, which is something that they had like a standard broadcast size, and then they opened it up to widescreen for like episode 6. And so you can clearly see, even on the Crunchyroll side, on the streaming side, you can clearly see the cutoff of the bottom of the cells for some of this stuff. Like they are sprinting towards the finish at the end of this. But I think it's a true credit to even still just how impressive it all looks. And I think the stylistic choice for black and white, it was weird at first, but especially when you got into the space battles, and then again, they are doing pencil sketches and wavy and all this kinds of stuff. And they're just like, and then they just hand wave and go, and then this great battle happened. They make a brief reference to the film Battle for Okinawa when like the number of ships that are left. And it's like, okay, all of our hopes are now on Gunbuster. Like you can feel the desperation in the animation, and just like everything there, I think just adds so much to the mood.
I really think episode 6 is really the episode where gainax is defined moving forward. There's just a lot of the presentation, or at least Anno is defined, and the kind of presentation that is there, the direction, the use of sound, the use of music, the use of animation style. Not so much maybe, it's black and white, which I actually think is perfect. But
I think it's perfect.
I think like when they're introducing like the ships and they're introducing the Gunbuster, and they have like the little text at the bottom, and it's semi-dramatic but not over dramatic, and you said that scene where it shows all the casualties, there's a lot, there's just so much Evangelion everywhere in the second half of that episode. It is just omnipresent, even to the point where you're talking about the Gunbuster goes down there and rips out its heart. Prior to that, the assumption was the Gunbuster was a robot, unlike any other robot. And here it is, Noriko tears off her shirt, and it's the Gunbuster tears off its exterior, and there's a rib cage. It's like, oh wait, are we still talking robots here?
Yeah, it's like a combination of bio and mechanical, because it's not like it ripped out a bleeding heart. It was very much a mechanical thing. But for it to have that specific anatomy, I can very much see that, like, especially with how much energy that thing has, and if you're thinking about the aliens that this is based on, where they also fire off a bunch of laser beams, and again, these are things that are hatched from suns. So especially I can think of, I wouldn't put it past it to, if they had some more expanded lore, and again, there are a bunch of interstitials of things of like, here's how the tech works, here's how warping works, in the middle of Gunbuster. So when I was originally giving you the estimate of about 3.5 hours, it's really, that's because they had all these extra sciencey bits in between the episodes where you have chibi versions of the characters going, here's how our tech works. And it's all just timey-wimey, just, conceptual stuff. Mm-hmm. None of it's real or based on any kind of science. It's, it's bullshit science, but it sounds cool.
Right.
But, Yeah, like I wouldn't be surprised if, that alien core or things, including that kind of tech and anatomy into the Gunbuster robot. Because again, it does feel very much like biomechanical. One last little flair for the uncanny, and then it's sort of undercut because again, you got to have some kind of nudity in the episode. So there's your titty shot for the episode. It's Noriko doing this big dramatic motion, and then all of a sudden it's like, did you really have to rip your leotard? Like, you don't have a replacement. You're going to be in space for quite a while, but sure.
Yes, she did.
So
yes, she did.
Yes, she did. It was essential for the story that she exposed a titty.
Yes.
So I think you mentioned the soundtrack earlier. I mean, this is another classic thing. Like the whole this moment and all these moments in the shows, it's very much in line with your, like the Gunbuster march, almost like a march orchestra tune. Very much, again, like the giant robot shows in the 70s and such. They were all, here's the robot, here's its powers, here's its name, fight, Gunbuster. Mm-hmm. Then, of course, you have your good old 80s J-pop to go in between, the opening. Absolute bop. Mm-hmm. And you also have the actresses for Noriko and Kazumi. They're the ones singing the vocal tracks. So it makes it even more impactful. And that's just a classic. I'm saying classic a lot, but it really is a classic trope. You have your main characters singing the fight song that'll then play when they're having this big moment. A lot of credit goes to Kohei Tanaka. Again, this was early in his career. It was a really big boost. Around this time, and then later, he did the soundtrack for The Dirty Pair with Sunrise. Very bouncy soundtrack. He later did Gainax's 1991 self-parody Otaku no Video. Oh, here's the Mobile Fighter G Gundam connection. He did the soundtrack for Mobile Fighter G Gundam. I knew I wrote it down. Mm-hmm. Sakura Wars, King of Braves, Gal Gaigar. If you want more recent examples, he did the opening theme. So he did the arrangement for the opening themes of JoJo's Adventure Part 1 Phantom Blood and Part 3 Stardust Crusader. So the opening credits themes is his music. Yeah, then he reprised his soundtrack for Gunbuster 2 a couple of years later, and that was a Gainax 20th anniversary project.
Yeah, I also love it when the characters sing their themes. I wonder if was that something that started with Macross?
Not exactly, but yes, Macross was, added a lot to the trope. And it's not just mecha shows. You have this all the time in several other series, especially in Japan. The seiyuu, the actors and actresses, usually have some sort of music credits, or their talent agencies have singing as part of their repertoire, usually like multi-talented. I've got one more section with character performances. Yeah. Like all about the actors. Fun things here. Some character names, like Noriko Takaya, is a real person. Noriko Takaya is an art staff member, backgrounds and like background harmony, so to make sure the background is consistent with the scenes. Noriko Takaya is married to Gainax co-founder and anime director Shinji Higuchi, who then would also form Studio Gonzo, one of our more recent studio rundowns. So yeah, Noriko Takaya in the show is based off of Noriko Takaya, the real person. And Noriko is voiced by Noriko Hidaka. And Noriko Hidaka has got a number of credits. So you've got Akane Tendo, who's the primary love interest from Ranma Half. Then she's in the original and the remake. She's after this, she came back as one of the main characters, Jean, from Nadia, The Secret of Blue Water. And then Kikyo from Inuyasha, who's the lady who's eventually reincarnated as Kagome. And that's just 3 of several roles. One of the ones that also stuck out to me is Psycho Pass from the 2010s. I
love Psycho Pass. Yes, I love it.
So she is the voice of the Dominator gun in Psycho Pass. Oh. So she is the last voice some people hear before their insides turn into their outsides. One thing about this more recent release, the one that you'll see that's on Crunchyroll and then the Discotek release, is of course Gunbuster's been released Gunbuster's had a number of home video releases, US, UK, all over the place. It's always been the Japanese voice with subtitles. Mm. The most recent one by Discotek Media, they announced it back in 2021, and then we didn't really get it until about May 2023. Yeah, and part of this release was the first ever English dub. And then for the English dub, not only is there an English dub now, they also remixed and kind of punched up some of the sound effects in the soundtrack just from the move over to the 5.1. So if you have a surround sound system, the English dub is I found to be pretty solid. Again, the first time I watched it in Japanese, this second time I kind of swapped between the two. So Noriko's English actor is Kiane Chula King, who actually has Noriko fan art on her profile page at Blue Sky. But if you've played Cassette Beasts, she's a character called Cleo. She's done a character called Kowloon, like a side character in One Piece. Sarah Florin from Zenless Zone Zero. Like Noriko seems to be her big role so far. For Kazumi Amano, you've got another big time actress in Rei Sakama in Japan. She's a long-time actress for the children's series Anpan Man, but she's also a Ranma half actress. This is a character named Shampoo, and she's currently reprising that role for the remake. So that's another Ranma half actress. She's also the Japanese voice for Gigi the cat in Kiki's Delivery Service. And then in English, Kazumi is voiced by Melissa Sternenberg. So Edinburgh from Azur Lane, Maria Calavera in the Ruby TV series, so like the Grim Reaper. There's so again, the Japanese actresses sing the insert songs. Korichiro Ota, it's Norio Wakamoto. It's Norio Wakamoto. He's Mr. 80s himself. Continues to be in everything. Mm-hmm. But English, it's Brady Gareth. He's got a long list of credits, so I only found some more like the 2020s. So the soccer anime Blue Lock, Shangri-La Frontier. There's a super boss in there called Weathermon the Tomb Guard. So he's the voice of that one. Mobile Suit Gundam Witch from Mercury. And Poor Young Freud, voiced by Maria Kawamura. I don't know why he named her Young Freud. I really,
such a terrible name.
Aside from the name, I don't see it. I don't see the connection to the actual, the psychologist Freud. She doesn't do anything Freudian, but okay.
No, it's just, it sounded cool. Sounded deep.
Like a lot of things that Ano would do.
Yeah.
Yeah, classic Ano. It just sounded cool and it sounded deep. Revelations, that's a kick-ass novel. Let's make a show about it. So, yeah, Young Freud is voiced by Maria Kawamura. We just did, well, not just did, my episode 5 was on Samurai Pizza Cats, and there's a very bready bunny princess named Usako Tokugawa. So she gets to voice a very bratty princess. But more notably, she's done various mecha series. So Heavy Metal L Game is a big one. Also the 5-star stories, of which these are both based off of mangas. So actually, Maria Kawamura married the manga author of Heavy Metal L Game and the 5-star stories. Also voice roles in Mobile Suit Zeta Gundam, Char's Counterattack, SD Gundam. In English, Young is voiced by Alexandra Yastishok, who's kind of playing up the accent just a little bit.
Is it really? It might not be an accent, is it?
She does have a little bit of that background. I think her parents may have come over. But this is her first main character anime role, or at least a major secondary role. There's a Pokemon side anime for Legends Arceus. It's titled Hisuian Snow. So she voices Captain Silene in that anime. Some video games she's done. Maeve Mabel from Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So the girl with I think who's always taking Cloud's picture. I think in Rebirth. Okay. I've got one last one. I was a little bit hesitant on the Starship Captain, but I was like, no, he's in the series often enough, and it's Tamio Oki. He's Dr. Tenma in 1980's Astro Boy, Chief Daisuke Aramaki in the Ghost in the Shell movies. So he's not Aramaki in Standalone Complex, but he's the movies in Mamoru Oshii-verse. When I saw it was Tamio Oki, I was like, okay, I'm going to give him a shout out. But in English, the Starship Captain, this is Tatsumi Tashiro. So, the old grizzled old man captain is voiced by Bill Jenkins. And he's done some narration on the One Piece, some TV specials. But if you've seen like One Piece film Red, he's the narrator on that. He's a character in Dragon Ball Z Kai, the Grand Elder Guru. And then just for the heck of it, Smith Torin, rest in peace from episode 3.
We never knew ye.
Kazuki. We never knew ye. So voiced by Kazuki Yao, he's Frankie in One Piece. It's a longtime side role in Initial D. He sings a number of One Piece songs as well. And I wanted to bring him up because he actually gets a big part of Gunbuster. There was a lot of merchandise, games, and things. It's been in video games. It's been Super Robot Wars. A lot of merchandise made for this, particularly with with the soundtrack, and they would, a lot of times they'll do what are called image songs. So these are things like they're not in the show, but they're made after the show. So they're like mood pieces. And he made a couple of like more rock and roll inspired tracks. So he sung some of the rock and roll image songs for Gunbuster on that album. And then in English, Smith Torrin is voiced by Ernesto Jason Labrick, who's Zeke Yeager or the Beast Titan in Attack on Titan, Robert Lucci in One Piece, but then Shaoran from Tsubasa Reservoir Chronicles, and then as well as Holic. I don't think he's voices Shaoran in Cardcaptor Sakura. I'm actually surprised this went so long without an English dub, but what we got is really good, I think. I have no complaints.
Why do you think that is? With this being such a fundamental piece in Gainax's library and being such a foundational piece towards what we would get towards one of the most influential animes of all time in Evangelion.
I think as far as this one not being dubbed for so long, I think part of it has to do with where some of the, I think it's just a home release kind of thing, because this has changed hands as far as distribution, both in Japan and abroad. This changed hands quite a few times. So there would be like a whole deal with when you are licensing a series, you are also licensing the dub. Mm-hmm. You're paying like a fee for the original dub. And because this changed so many hands over in the US and other things, like this was in a mess. Like essentially this will be covered more in like, I'm going to paraphrasing from the studio rundown. It's just kind of off the top of my head. So if I misspeak here, then it's in the rundown. So forgive me on this bit. But essentially, Gainax made a home video label called Oniami's. It was over here, and so it was for distributing their works in the US. And like many things that Gainax touched, it withered on the vine and didn't really last very long. It got snapped up by Bandai Visual, who ran it for a little while, then got snapped up by somebody else and somebody else. And so it basically just got lost in the shuffle. So in between all of that, I think it was just this various dance of going between rights holders for international distribution as far as the English dub specifically. And, it's been various remasters and retouches over the year as well. Like even for you were talking about some of the censoring for the broadcast release, even like episode 6 had like, there's a moment when you see like the whole episode is in black and white, but on the original version, episode 6 actually had these moments of color. Basically at the climax of the episode, you don't see any of that color. They went back and re-edited. They retouched it to turn all of those color segments to match black and white. So it's been a matter of just fiddling over the years, is what I would say. So that's just me kind of spitballing here, just because of the various musical chairs that this has had over the years and the different formats and the different licensees. There's not really anything I can say negatively about either dub. I mean, there's sometimes, I guess, when the cast is shouting in the Japanese dub, they do kind of peak out a little bit.
Yes, I noticed that too. There's some sound balancing at points.
Yeah, definitely some sound balancing. Like if there's anything, that's more of an audio balancing thing. That's not that's not a mark against the performance. But yeah, definitely an audio balancing thing. If there's one other little slight deal, like especially in episode 1 and 2, I think there's a bit of frame jitter, just with how it is. The cell is just moving across a little bit, and that's just that's just me in general. That kind of I remember the first time I was watching, I had to take a break between episodes because it was almost like when you're watching a movie with a lot of camera shake. Mm-hmm. It's a stylistic choice. Yeah, it's a stylistic choice that's giving me a headache. Please stop. Mm-hmm. So it's only a little bit of that in parts. Because again, this, for what it's worth, as good as this show looks, they were working with a very small comparative budget. And so they were squeezing out everything that they could from this show. And you can tell, like, they really just went for it. And after a while, even though Gunbuster, of course, inevitably ran over budget, this is their first profitable series. Mm-hmm. It's their first profitable show. They were able to spin off a lot of merchandising and able to get a lot of return. and to keep going. Now, it didn't clear their debts. Not even close. Gainax was still, overall, was in the red, but it gave them enough wind in their sails to go, we can keep going and keep producing more things.
Where was this in relation to Appleseed? I thought Appleseed was a popular one.
Yeah, Appleseed was also mid-80s. I feel like Appleseed was 85. Let me see. Appleseed anime was, here is, yeah, let me see. Adaptations, anime. 1988.
So around the same time.
1988. So it's around the same time. Yeah. This was Bandai Visual. It wasn't Bandai who did the Appleseed anime. Were you seeing like some relations or just?
Well, wasn't Gainax behind Appleseed?
Gainax was, yes.
That's why I asked. I thought Appleseed was a popular anime. That's why, like, if you have these two coming around at the same time.
Okay, right.
Yeah. Because you're saying they weren't in the green yet. And if this was their first profitable, and I'm like, oh, wow, I guess Appleseed didn't do as well as I thought it did.
Yeah, Appleseed was let me see, production. Yeah, AIC. Appleseed was like a AIC Gainax kind of deal, and it was with Bandai Visual. So it was more in conjunction. But yeah, Gainax certainly did work on Appleseed. This is more like in the spring of 1988. If we're talking about the Appleseed OVA, that was spring of 88, which is before Gunbuster. Gunbuster was their first like original hit.
Yes. Okay. Got it. I mean, I think like it's more foundational than Appleseed is too.
Yeah. Appleseed is more like foundational with the overall vibe of cyberpunk, it would later go for Ghost in the Shell. It's the same author, Masamune Shiro. So yeah, the Appleseed OVA, certainly there, that would have just been a animation fee. So nothing that they weren't able to merchandise it like they were able to with Gunbuster and the rest.
Gotcha. Okay, that's the big difference. Okay, gotcha.
Again, perpetual shot foot syndrome with this frickin' studio. But yes, Gunbuster was their first original series to turn a profit.
That's awesome. Well earned too. I mean, that you can. There are elements that I think we've kind of talked about this throughout the episode where it does kind of feel rushed at parts. Episode 3 being a very evident of that. But for a young studio going independent, I mean, that makes it make a lot more sense.
And a hell of a debut work as well. It's just so many things and careers, not just Ano's, so many design works. Like this was a feather in a lot of early career caps for the 80s. This was a time where not just the bubble economy and just the big boom of the OVA scene, this was a major creative time for the anime scene, just primarily because there was so much going in and people were taking these kinds of risks, and so much of this our foundational talent that would define the 90s and beyond was forged here. And I think that's really like, if we're talking about the true legacy of Gunbuster, so many, just the overall just legacy of Gainax. When we think about the good old days of Gainax and Evangelion and things like this, I think this has to be in the conversation.
Yeah, we would not have a lot of modern day trends that we have today in anime if it was not for Gunbuster, just because of all the starts that this anime did have, and a lot of the information that you brought to my attention throughout our discussions, both here and prior to coming on this episode, I would never have guessed this anime was this important. And these are the reasons I like searching out these types of projects and shows, because it's very enlightening in terms of how some of the biggest properties in the medium came to be. And it's always impressive finding these gems. And I never would have thought it was anything like this prior to getting into it, because all you get is just naked girls and machines. And that's what you're getting there.
And depression.
Well, you don't see a lot of depression on the posts and social media. It's explosions and boobs. But aside from that, you do get that in the show proper itself, which is, yes, it is a trademark of a lot of Gainax and Anno projects for sure.
And it was a lot of fun to share this with you. So I hope you had a good time coming on the show and learning about Gunbuster and the early days of Gainax. If you ever,
did.
I have one little last question.
Yeah.
Is it does Gunbuster make you want to check out more mecha series like it, or is it just something just specific about Gunbuster and not terribly interested in the rest? Like, have you seen Gurren Lagann or?
I have not, but I would be interested in exploring them more because I used to be almost exclusively into mecha type anime. And this is something that would probably get me more back into it. I definitely need to go back and check out more Macross. Macross Plus
Yeah, me too.
is my favorite
Yeah.
anime of all time, but I've never watched the entire first release, its original release. Thing was television. I wouldn't. It's not OVA. It's a kind of long series, not as long as some of the other ones, but I need to go back there because that to me feels really like the aside from Gundam, the original Gundam is Gundam and Macross, which is kind of like the royalty of mecha anime. And so I need to dip my toes into that. And beyond that, yeah, I do bring up Appleseed. I'd love to get into like Appleseed and Pat Labor, Gurren Lagann. Those are ones that I haven't really dove into and I would like to see more of. I'd like to revisit Escaflowne, which is a mecha isekai. That's it's something I haven't watched in a long time, and I'd like.
Escaflowne is special. Yeah. I remember you saying you liked Escaflowne. I was resistant into getting into mecha at first, and then after experiencing the original Gundam and the movies and other things, it was one of those like it finally clicked. And so it's been a joy to experience the mecha genre and like really want to be passionate and get into it, not just because Gunbuster is a important historical, whatever. I may as well watch it for some sort of nebulous completion's sake. Like, no, this is a show stands entirely on its own, with some exceptions, just because of the fan service. I think Gunbuster is going to be like right there on the list of, okay, if you want good old classic 80s sci-fi, just goodness, that's not going to take up too much of your time. You can finish it in an afternoon and just, cry into your tissues later.
Mm-hmm.
Gunbuster, certainly.
No, I would agree with that recommendation. It's a total of 3 hours, if not a little less. Very easy to watch, very digestible. Yes, it has its weak points, of course. This is a debut initial effort from a studio, so that can be expected. But it does very well, and the way it progresses from a very light-hearted anime into something more serious, dire, and reflective is definitely a style that you see with Ano. I mean, this is much like Evangelion, where it starts as kind of your typical mecha anime and then devolves into something completely just completely crazy. And not as crazy as Eva, of course. This is much more of your standard type of anime. But again, as we've said multiple times, this is a show that definitely provides those building blocks and is far, far, far more comprehensible than the later efforts of Ano. So this is something that if you want to see the beginnings of that, and you want to see a quality product that completely shifts gears throughout and makes you think differently throughout the show, this is definitely worth visiting. 100%.
Thank you for coming out on the show, and this was a really fun, really long conversation, as it usually turns up being. But it's that's just kind of how it goes. There's always a lot to unpack with a series like this. It's very layered, and just the kind of legacy of a show like Gunbuster. So thanks again for joining me on this little journey of discovery. This was a fun show to research as well, and to dig into the little bit of stories and early debut works from story directors are always interesting to see, no matter what genre or animation or not. I always think if you have a favorite director, it's always worth checking out their first like major project and sort of seeing the foundational works in, like, again, your favorite things. To Evangelion doth all things turn eventually with this. Chris, once again, where can the fine folks of the internet find you?
Well, yeah, I'll let them know here in a second, but I just want to thank you for having me on. My anime is very rusty, so hopefully I didn't embarrass myself too much here. I do thank you for the opportunity. It was a great time. I liked I liked talking about Gunbuster, and I love the information that you put out and listening to it because it's you're always so informative with these very well researched, and I really hope anyone who enjoys anime finds your show one way or another. But if you do want to find my show, you can find me over at the Retro Hangover podcast, which is over at our link tree, which is linktr.ee/retro hangover. And that includes the links to all of our socials except for Blue Sky. We are on Blue Sky too. I noticed that hasn't been updated. Maybe that's a Blue Sky thing. I'll have to yell at Shane. I always yell at Shane about that. And I don't know if that's something he can do or not. So if he can't, whatever. But we're on all of the socials there. You can find our website. You can find our the podcatcher of your choice. We're there too. And we hope to see you around on the internets, whether it be just a comment on one of our socials or harassing me in Super Dave's channel in our Discord or in Super Dave's Discord. Probably if you're listening to this, preferably there. So yeah, go check us out. linktr.ee/retro hangover. And if you're listening to this, I think a Magic Knight Rareth episode came out recently. Or a Vampire Hunter D episode came out recently. So we're gonna have a Ghost in the Shell standalone complex episode came out recently with Dave here. So yeah, go check that out. Lots of anime inspired episodes over at the Retro Hangover podcast.
Yeah, February is the anime month. So unlike last year, I actually suggested an anime for anime month. So Ghost in the Shell was certainly a game of all time on the PSP with that control scheme.
Oh no.
You work with the cards that you're dealt with. So look forward to that episode on the Retro Hangover. And until next time, I hope you guys had fun listening to this episode. Thanks for making it this far. Stay safe. And like always, watch more cartoons.